In this video, I will be telling you about whether you want to start your data science career in industry, consulting, or at a startup. This video will appeal to everybody that is looking to transition into a data science career. It will also appeal to graduates that are just starting out. They're starting out their data science career and they don't really know what to expect in other industries. So I have 6 years of data science experience, data and analytics experience, and these 6 years was spent in consulting, in industry, and I currently work at a startup. So I'll perhaps, just so that we're on the same page, I will start by giving you what I mean, my definitions of what I mean by industry, what I mean by consulting, and what I mean by startup. All right. So I'm going to get into those definitions, what I mean by a consulting company. When I say a consulting company, and I'll read the formal definition that I got from blog.hubspot.com, a consulting company is a business comprised of industry-specific experts who offer professional advice and guidance and actionable solutions to businesses experiencing issues they cannot deal with in-house. So this is, like I said, it's a definition from blog.hubspot.com. Some examples are Deloitte, Accenture, McKinsey and Company. You may have heard of some of these. Now I'll go on to what I mean when I speak about industry. So by industry, I mean an established business. This is a business that's been in operation for a good number of years. It's usually a big business and it usually has a good number of employees, say 500. Just so you get my definition and it's pretty clear. So this is all the other companies. So I suppose in this instance, when I speak of industry, I'm not talking about companies like Facebook or Amazon or Netflix that are data-driven companies, right? I'm just speaking about, say, your local telecommunications company or, your local grocer, if they have a big company. Those are what I mean by industry in this context. And finally, a startup. When I speak about a startup, I'm talking about a company that is usually young, 3-5 years old. It hasn't been around for a very long time. The company is still figuring out who they're trying to be, in a sense. So that's kind of what I mean by a startup. So usually has also, important thing about a startup, they usually have a small number of employees as well. So that's the definitions. So what are the things that you should consider if you're a graduate, if you're looking to move industry? What are the things that you should consider when looking to start your data science career? I'll start with consulting. And I think an important thing, just to set the context, is to let you know that if you are going to be working or moving into a consulting company, what you should expect is that either the consulting company will hire you into an analytics division of their main company, but a lot of consulting companies these days have bought, so they've acquired a lot of smaller analytics, specialized analytics companies. And chances are that if they're hiring you to be a data scientist, you will be working as a data scientist in that acquired smaller division of the company that is more specialized. I'll just state some pros and cons, starting with the cons and ending with some pros, just so that we leave on a sweet note. And the cons of starting your career in a consulting company are as follows. So the type of work, that's the first thing. The type of work that you get to do as a data scientist in a consulting company is highly dependent on the kind of clients that you will get and the maturity level of those clients. So depending on whether or not your clients are ready for computer vision and your clients are ready for somebody to come and build an NLP solution, that will determine whether or not you get to work on those kinds of problems. My experience was that because I was working in an environment that wasn't as mature from a data science perspective, my data science exposure while working in consulting was very limited. Most of the work ended up being visualization type work. So working with Power BI and creating data stories, which is something that's important to learn. But if you are looking for that more deep learning type work, then you might find it a bit more difficult in this environment. The other con is the length of the projects. The length of the projects in a consulting environment tend to be short-lived. So there isn't a lot of space to go deep. A lot of the times you might get an opportunity to have breadth, but not depth. So you need to be able to understand that you might get to do a little bit of everything in the data science field, but not necessarily the opportunity to go deep in the data science field that you are interested in. So that's another con. In a sense, it's a con in a sense, but I suppose it depends, right? If you know exactly what you want to do, then this might be a con. But if you don't know what you want to do and you are looking to explore, you're looking to try a couple of things, then perhaps, this isn't necessarily a con for you. And then we'll go on to the pros. What are the pros of working in consulting? If you are still starting out and you're not sure, like I said, with the analytics pipeline, where you want to sit, what kind of analytics work that you can do. I mean, you can go as far as going from data management to doing a visualization to going straight to neural networks. And so if you're not sure where on the data pipeline you want to sit, then starting out your career in consulting is definitely the best, because you will get to experience the breadth of data work, and then you can choose where exactly you want to sit. The second pro, depending on the kind of person that you are, of course, is the pace. The pace is fast. You're expected to learn quickly. There are people that are usually more experienced that are willing to coach you and help you. They want to get you up to speed as quickly as possible so that you can start to deliver. So again, I've placed this in pros because I think it gives you the opportunity to learn at a pace that's quick. But if learning quickly and having to work crazy hours isn't something you find as your cup of tea, then this is perhaps a con for you. The other pro is the structured way in which you learn how to work in consulting. Consultants love frameworks. A lot of the things that consultants do are placed in frameworks. They're usually organized, and so they will teach you a lot of the times ways of thinking about problems that you may not get to learn if you start somewhere else. So structured frameworks of thinking about how do you get a problem from the customer, how do you turn that into a project, how do you think through your timelines. This is important information that you will be using for your whole career. So that's an important thing to consider. And the last important pro is the brand, right? Where you start matters, because people use that as a proxy to determine how good you are. When you have a good company or a strong company next to your name, then that brand carries a lot of weight for all your next jobs. So that is, I suppose those are the pros and cons as far as consulting is concerned. Now I'll move on to industry. A company in industry will hire data scientists to work for them in an internal support function generally. So you are a support. You're supporting usually either a department or a team or the whole company, depending on how they've organized the company. And who you support will determine the amount of data, what kind of data you will have access to, and that's important. So I'll go on to the cons of working in industry. A lot of big companies, they struggle with the concept of data. So the idea of something being data driven, or the evangelism or comfort with data, is not something that's really well established in industry companies a lot of the times. A lot of them are quite new to the concept and they want to become data driven. They just don't know how, and a lot of them aren't really that experienced. And because of that, if you are starting out, depending on how much evangelism has been done and the maturity level of the department or the company you'll be working for, you might not be able to do projects that are complex, right? Because people just aren't ready for those. Because of that, I suppose with that, if you have decided that, you know what, you want to try out industry, you have to find out in the interview the comfort level of people with data in that company, the adoption level. Are people not just creating models and keeping them in the Jupyter notebooks on their laptops? Are people actually productionizing data science models? Are people actually using these as part of their day-to-day operations? I think that conversation and asking those questions will help you understand whether or not the company you're going to is at the level of maturity where you will get to do exciting projects. So that's an important one. So resistance is the most important area. I suppose that's the biggest con of working in industry. A pro of working in industry is the specific business knowledge that you'll gain. So there are data scientists that are completely technical, but the quality of the models that you can build will be determined by how well you understand the models that you're building. So understanding an industry, understanding the levers that are important to tweak, understanding what kind of feature engineering you can do to try and make the variables you're trying to model more useful is really, really important. And I think it puts you at an advantage. A lot of the times, because data scientists tend to focus more on model building and less on industry understanding, those data scientists that are deep in the industry and understand the industry are actually at an advantage. So the good thing about working in industry is that without even trying, just because you're sitting there and doing this work, you get to understand the industry so well, and it really, really will help you become a better data scientist as well. So that's an important pro to note about industry. The pace of learning can be pretty slow. I suppose that's something I should have mentioned in cons. The pace of big companies can be really slow. Part of it is politics. Oh my goodness. There's so much politics generally with big industry. There's a lot of red tape around getting things done. So because of that, it can mean that you can feel like things are taking much, much longer than they should. But I suppose you can turn that and see that as a pro. And the pro of that is that you have time to dig into the things that you find interesting. They have the ability to grow you. You get to choose what kind of knowledge you want, and they will typically have the resources, and they will typically want to upskill you. So that's a big pro. They have training resources, they have training budgets. You have time to learn and go as deep as you need to for the things that you would like to learn. So that's a big pro, I suppose. You can look at that. You can look at that as a pro. The other thing is the brand, right? Depending on the big company that you're working for and what they're known for, that brand can be helpful.
Last but certainly not least, I'll go into the pros and cons of working at a startup. So startups are like accelerated research institutions. I think you can see them in that way. And I would recommend that for early stage startups, data scientists should work at startups where data analytics is the product. I don't know if startups that don't have data analytics as the product are actually getting data scientists, but it's not really something that I recommend because the lean nature of startups makes it very difficult. I stand to be corrected, but my recommendation is that if you are a data scientist and you're looking to work at a startup, you should look to work at a startup where data analytics or data science algorithm, that is the product. I think you look to benefit most from those kinds of companies. Now I'll start with the cons and I'll finish it with the pros just so we end it on a good note again. The toughest thing about the startup is the pace. Startups work really fast. Everything needs to happen, it needs to happen quickly. So the pace means, one, you need to learn fast, and the pace does tend to also mean that people that are there do not have the capacity to mentor or teach as well. Because everybody's stretched thin, everybody's working on the edge of their seats, a lot of the times you will have to do a lot of figuring things out yourself, a lot of working on your own, and you might not get as much hand-holding or as much mentorship or as much teaching and upskilling as you would like from at least the more experienced senior people in your team. So I think that can be a con for startups. The other important con is the brand. If your first job is at a startup whose name no one recognizes, it is difficult when you're trying to move on to other jobs. Of course, there is, the portfolio of the work that you have. There is, of course, just showing that you got to do interesting projects, you got to learn interesting skills. But starting your job at a startup, it doesn't carry much of a brand name. So it's not really something you can use, at least from a branding perspective. It's not something that you can use to propel your career. It does make it a little bit tougher for people to notice you, but you can use, of course, your portfolio of work. You can use your expertise to sell yourself in that context. And then I'll end it with the pros. What are the pros of working at a startup? The good thing about working at a startup is that the job is usually centered around innovating an existing algorithm. You will either be building algorithms from scratch, or you'll be innovating and creating variations or bettering an algorithm that already exists. You are sure that the work that you are doing, one, is important, it's a nice feeling. It's a nice feeling to know that the work that you do is important, it is front and center, and that it's not in vain. So the work that you do will get productionized, and it is the work that the client is going to be using. So that's an important pro. It does put some pressure in terms of the work that you do, but it is definitely an important thing to know that your work is important. And the other pro is the well-roundedness that you can get from a startup. Because of the bootstrapping nature of startups and how usually there are very few people that are available to do the work that's necessary, it means that you will likely get exposure to a lot of the analytics pipeline and not just data science specifically. So there might be other parts of analytics work that you might be interested in that you will get the opportunity to work in because there's just so few people. So another advantage of working at a startup and starting at the startup is the exposure that you'll get to different parts of the analytics pipeline, which I think is important. But again, I've mentioned some pros and cons of both consulting industry and a startup. But I think it's important to note that these are generalizations that I've made based on my own experience. It doesn't mean that there aren't people in industry that are having a startup experience or people that are in consulting that are having an industry experience, for example. These are just generalizations that I've created based on my own experiences and the experiences of those people that I know. So it's important to note. But regardless of where you want to start your data science career, I think you need to be clear what you want to get out of it. So if it is that I'm just interested in data science and I'm not sure where to start, I'm not sure where do I want to sit in data engineering, do I want to sit in data science specifically, and in data science do I want to be more statistically aligned or do I want to be more storytelling, visualization aligned, then I think either a startup or a consulting company will give you that breadth of exposure that you need. But if you are sure, you are comfortable, you know exactly what you want, you know that you want to work on these specific types of problems, and you know that what you want is depth, then perhaps working in industry might be best for you because you know exactly what you want. And in the industry companies that you're having and in the interviews that you'll be having, you will be able to stress or try and understand whether or not these people work in the specific area that you're looking for and whether or not you'll be able to get that level of depth. But yeah, the most important thing is that if you do get an interview to start a data science role in any of these companies, remember that while they're interviewing you, you are also interviewing them. And asking the right questions will ensure that you are not disappointed with the job that you get. Your career is yours, and every job decision you make determines how you shape your career and how you will grow. So just think about the decisions properly. If you have the option to, and options are absolutely fantastic. If you found this helpful, please give it a massive thumbs up. Share it with others that you think might find it helpful, people that might benefit from it. Switch on the notification bell so that you can see all the other videos that I'll be uploading. I'll see you next time on the soft side of